What's going on, everybody? Stocks by the numbers. Welcome back. Today's Wednesday. We had CPI data come out, of course, hotter than expected, even though, of course, every single time these numbers are reported, people try to push the narrative that inflation is quote-unquote cooling. Then we have a big drop-off like this when the data actually hits. However, I believe if memory serves correct, the last time that this happened, we had a big drop like this, and then the next day, the markets immediately rebounded. So I really don't even know if this is the beginning of, in my opinion, what should be a justified sell-off that actually should have taken place several months ago. But either which way, I don't want to go off on a tangent. But as you see, markets down basically a touch over 1% across the board, all three major indices, and we can see the 10-year up about 3.25%, we'll call it. 20-year yield now up 2.4%. Usually the old adage used to be that when bonds go up, stocks go down, but we'll see what happens. But I wanted to do a quick update here on everyone's favorite stock, SoundHound AI Incorporated, ticker symbol SOUN, listed here on the NASDAQ. Stock right now, $4.40 a share, down almost half a point. 9.4% here on the day. Obviously opened up much lower here at $4.19 a share. And what happened was this company issued 150 million $150 million worth of shares at the market, though. They didn't at the market, which is interesting, because usually we see that when smaller companies like this do a new stock offering, usually we notice that they'll do the offering at or even above kind of where the stock was, and that'll kind of help drive the stock price down even more. Now, usually, of course, everyone's worried about dilution. Anytime a company issues shares, does a stock offering, and obviously they reiterate this here. Stockholders are often wary of capital raises because of worries over capital dilution. Shares were down 10%, but overall, in my opinion, I really don't view this as a red flag, because I felt that, even personally, in my opinion, I felt that the stock would eventually come back down to the fours. And I drew out a couple of trend lines last time to show you where I feel, in my opinion, the stock could potentially go. Now, there's a 3-month chart, and if you see here, you can see the bottom fib 422, stock went down to 419 and kind of immediately had that bounce. And if we zoom in now on this trend line here on the daily, you can see we immediately came out. We had the open, says 425. We dropped down, and then we immediately tried to retest this line. We had the big pop above it. Looks like it almost wanted to retest it, and then actually rose up here to about 458, and then slowly began to trickle back down. We had really big volume here just about 10 minutes ago. Big red candle, and now we've been stepping up consistent green candles since that point, trying to get back to the moving average. So going to be hard to tell, obviously, in this moment if we're going to be able to hold this trend line. However, as you see here, about 430 potentially, we could reject off of this 20-day moving average now and potentially pull back and sell off. But, you know, offering 150 million, market cap was about $1.5 billion before the offering took place. So, you know, they raised about 150 million, which is roughly 10%, and you can see the stock is down right around 10%. So in my mind, this all makes sense. And again, technically, in my opinion, there really is no reason. I don't want to say no reason it has to hold this line. However, again, like I mentioned in previous videos here when I drew out a lot of these levels, in my opinion, if it breaks this line to try to retest this $3.99, $4 level, and then potentially comes back to the trend line, in my opinion, I would understand that, because we did go on a pretty massive run. And of course, it was basically because Nvidia was involved in the situation, which I can appreciate. However, again, technically, the company itself didn't do anything spectacular, in my opinion, to warrant a rally from 230, 240 up to 10.5, 10.25, wherever it went. So, in my opinion, I was kind of expecting this drop to happen, but of course, we were slowly bouncing off of these levels and trying to regain some of these levels before breaking down and testing other ones. But overall, in my opinion, you guys know how I feel about SoundHound. In my opinion, I think this is going to be a phenomenal long-term player. I think the possibilities could be potentially endless for what they bring to the table. I know someone else actually mentioned that they were talking about all the immigrants and all of the foreign language translations that could potentially be taking place through the voice AI software that SoundHound brings to the table as well. We spoke last time when we did an update speaking about the healthcare sector. They were talking about the potential capabilities of the voice AI in the healthcare sector, in the healthcare AI sector. So, in my opinion, the possibilities are endless. And long term down the road, I really don't see any reason, unless they randomly start losing clients or start releasing some really negative catalysts, I really see no reason as to why over time this stock can't get back up to $8, $9, $10 a share and potentially even higher. If you're asking me, in my opinion, a couple of years down the road, how do I feel about it? In my opinion, I think one day this will be like a $20, $25 stock. And I actually think we're being conservative. But of course, in order to get to that point, I mean, we're talking about a 5x. So that would bring our market cap up to, 7, 8 billion in change. And that would have to translate to the company continuing to expand its footprint, sign new clients, and consistently increase its revenue. And of course, consistently forecast positive, bigger, and better things, right? Now, of course, we're getting a little bit ahead of ourselves, but in my opinion, I was kind of expecting this drop. That's why I drew out all these trend lines to try to show a couple of levels the stock could potentially go. And here I just feel like, again, not necessarily that it has to come back to $4, but I just think that after the run up and where we came from, and now again with the offering, I just think that we may consistently slide down. Even if we stay in this range and bounce around, I do think we eventually see roughly this $3.99, $4 level, which is, again, the first level we kind of stopped at before we catapulted up to the next level higher. So, in my opinion, again, obviously in the short term, this sucks. I mean, if you recently bought the stock at $6, $7 a share, obviously you're very upset right now. I can appreciate that. But that's why I always say, in my opinion, you're much better off piecing your way in. And after the stock ran from $2.40 to $10, if you began buying at 8 or 7, and then you wake up a couple of weeks later and you're down here sub 5, in my opinion, you can add a little bit more. Now they issue more shares, the stock drops to the low 4s, right? It's bouncing around. Maybe you wake up in a couple of days, we're back at the $4 level. Boom, you have a little bit of cash, you add to the position a little bit, and you bring your average cost down. That's why, in my opinion, I think that is probably the best strategy to use. But of course, everyone has their own strategy. Everyone's entitled to their own opinion. But 150 million new shares here. And I know this has kind of been going on for a while because I know they issued, I think it was roughly 18 million shares not too long ago, if memory serves correct. So the float has really been increasing. The float, I remember, used to be, I want to say, maybe like 180 million shares. I'm sorry, my apologies. I'd have to look it up. But I remember when we first started looking at the stock, I know it was sub 200 million. Now you can see, we're climbing up here north of $250 million. We have a new offering here today. So the float is increasing, and the theory is obviously if you issue more shares, then technically the shares that were already existing are technically worth less because now there's more supply out there, right? But in my opinion, again, I really wouldn't worry because chances are I'd probably give them the benefit of the doubt that over time here, maybe over the next month or two, we may start getting 1 or 2 news reports coming out of, hopefully, in my opinion, another 1, 2, 3 clients that they can add to their list, which obviously will reinvigorate the positivity behind the company, and hopefully it'll bottom out somewhere, maybe along one of these trend lines, and then kind of bounce and try to climb back up. But if we switch over stock charts quickly, we can see that the RSI on the daily now back down here at 37 1/3. Again, the RSI on this stock, as you see, was up at 90 at this point here when we initially rallied up to about 8. Then we had the pullback to sub 6, and then we exploded back up to north of 10, pushing the RSI above that 70 benchmark. And now we've kind of been slowly giving it away We recently broke the mid-Bollinger Band, and now with this news today, we are now below the 50-day moving average that we were trying to bounce off of for the last couple of days here at around 492. So stock right now, 441. Again, my key level that I'm looking at is about $3.99, $4 a share. However, if we do continue to keep slipping, you can see bottom Bollinger Band 352. And then, of course, we could potentially meet up with the 200-day moving average as well, 295. Now, again, I understand in the short term, it may seem like a drastic move, right? You may have heard about this stock a little bit later. You see this massive run, and now we just went from 10 basically down to 4. And technically, that's a 60% drop. So I know a lot of people may be kind of weary about the situation, wondering, is it worth holding? Did they make, a wrong decision? And in my opinion, again, I would say that I personally would view this as a longer term value hold. So if you didn't get into trade and you've been watching, because now recently again, now after the stock started moving, all of a sudden everyone and their brother who has a YouTube channel tried to update you guys on SOUN, right? So those guys are Johnny come latelys, we know that. They're late to the party. But now everyone and their brother is watching this like a hawk, right? So in my opinion, every time there's a big dip like this, there's still volume coming in because people still see, in my opinion, the long-term value that can come down the road several years from now. So that's why, again, in my opinion, I really wouldn't be too stressed about the situation. And if you are down a chunk, I would, again, focus on why you bought it and, try to remember what the end goal is. And, like I always say, if you bought this early up here at, high 6s, 7s, and now it's down here at 4, like I say, if I liked it at 7, I should love it at 4. So that's why I always say, in my opinion, try to view every situation as positively as you can. But here on the weekly, RSI now down to a touch over 53. But we can see we were looking for the 352 level, bottom Bollinger Band, on the daily, and now you can see here on the weekly, the mid Bollinger Band 362. So this is why I'm saying we could potentially continue to keep slipping because we really did have a pretty big explosion, larger than I personally expected. But that's why we could really begin to chunk down and sell off. And I am expecting about another 10% drop from here back to about the $4 level. But then we'll be below this trend line technically, so then the next stop could be down here, which is why I'm pointing out all these levels to you guys. But let's look at the pivot points real quick, and I'll let you go. As we can see here on the weekly, our resistance level, well, now support level, but was about 4.5, and we can see the stock broke through that, currently sitting at 441. The MACD has curled towards the downside. That's another thing, too. If we slowly begin to step down and get back to 4 sub 4, we could potentially have a MACD about to cross to the downside, which could accelerate the sell-off even further, which is why I keep reminding everyone about this gap fill. And I know people keep saying, well, the institutions are buying, the word is out, there's no way. People said this just a couple of days ago in comments section. And again, I'm not bashing anyone because, everyone has a different opinion. We're all looking at it differently. No one's always correct. But a lot of people were saying, like here, when we were bouncing around this trend line, they were like, oh, there's no way it goes below, 5.5 here and dips below this trend line. There's too much institutional buying. The word is out, blah, blah, blah. But remember, technically, in theory, you may have been correct because the stock was seemingly holding these levels. However, of course, when we issue more shares, that's out of our control. And usually that always results in a stock dropping down drastically. But we can see here on the daily now, our support level here, 369. So in my opinion, we have $4, $3.99 to watch. Then we have 369. Then we have 362. Then we have 352. But if we break this line, then chances are we're going to retest this trend line down here. As you see, if this happens in the next couple of days, we could be looking at about 338, 340. And then if we just broke through all of these key levels and these trend lines, then in my opinion, the gap fill may look inevitable. And again, I understand that you may be very upset watching this happen. And of course, again, if you own it at 6.7, you don't want to see it come back down here to 242 or whatever it is and fill the gap. However, in my opinion, if the theory is gaps always fill, and it's only a matter of time before it fills the gap and then tries to bounce and run back up to where it was, then in my opinion, you're probably better off that it has this immediate pump and retracement so that it can fill the gap and then bounce back up, right? Because I feel like I wouldn't want it to stay steady here and bounce and run back up to 8, 9, and have people thinking that it's going to be a massive short-term winner, when in reality, again, if markets did begin to sell off at this level, the stock can easily chunk down and fill that gap regardless, potentially. You understand what I'm saying? So in my opinion, you may be better off that the company is raising capital and issuing these shares while the stock is still up, because again, we technically went on a massive run, in my opinion, a little bit of an overreaction. I mean, people saw Nvidia and we took the stock from 2.5 to 10.5. So that's why I'm saying I expected this sell-off, and in my opinion, the fact that it's kind of immediately happening, the company raising some capital for itself, and now we could potentially start dropping down and fill this gap here almost immediately, and then everyone and their brother is going to pile in, and the stock is probably immediately going to go back up to $4 or $5 a share, in my opinion. But again, either which way, it really doesn't matter, because we all want the best price. And again, if you wish your cost was 2.5 and right now it's up here at like 4.5, as the stock dips down, I still say, in my opinion, I would add to the situation. I still do personally believe that over the next maybe 2 to 3 years, in my opinion, I think this is a $25 stock. And the only thing that can stop them really is themselves, in my opinion. So, of course, we don't want to get ahead of ourselves, but just wanted to do a quick update here. SOUN, again, issuing more shares, stock taking roughly a 9% hit right now. Dow down over 500 points here, NASDAQ dropping 200 points. Look at the S&P down almost 60 points, and you can see the yield staying up, right? 10-year yield, even when we started the video, was up at about 3.25%, still up above 3%. 20-year yield now approaching 2.5%. Most of the stocks taking a hit across the board, of course, except for ExxonMobil, which has been doing very well as the price of oil has been climbing. And I was saying that months ago, and this is why I preach, in my opinion, that if you have the capital, you are much better off taking the position in shares if you can, and waiting for the quote-unquote inevitable move that we feel may happen, as opposed to trying to time calls or puts 1, 2, 3 weeks out and hoping that the move takes place. Because when they brought oil back down to sub 70 a barrel, you can ask anyone in Discord. I was flipping out daily, saying that in my opinion, they're suppressing the price of oil. We had wars break out overseas internationally, both in the Russia-Ukraine and, of course, the Israel-Hamas, whatever's going on over there. So we had all of this breaking out, while at the same time, oil that was up randomly dropped all the way back down to 70, sub 70 a barrel. And I was basically laying out, in my opinion, that makes zero logical sense, and it's only a matter of time before it goes back up. And it took a while, because I feel personally that they did try to keep the prices down. However, again, the inevitable move, and now you can see oil recently almost hit 90 a barrel, I believe, and now it's sitting here at about 85.25. So if you tried to time the ETF, again, the oil ETF for your records is USO, and if you tried to time, 2-3 weeks out on USO calls, chances are you were probably incorrect, because it didn't move much. However, if you simply stepped in and bought shares of USO, quote unquote, knowing, in my opinion, that oil was inevitably going to climb up in value, then you eliminated a lot of the stress, in my opinion. You didn't have a deadline, and you're basically just waiting for the rebound to happen. And, and then you're going to reap the rewards. So, obviously, if you did that, you're up a nice chunk right now, probably about 20%, 15, 20% in change. But, this is why I say, even a situation like SOUN, Like, in my opinion, I wouldn't try to be an option player on SOUN. The way I'm looking at it here is the fact that they were holding it at around 5 and change, and of course the company just issued shares, we could potentially say that the stock is maybe, in my opinion, worth around $5. So in my opinion, as we drop down here and we're sub $5, I would simply have the priority of accumulating shares and continuing to build a position. But that is just me. That is just my opinion. And I'm going to end it there. So once again, this is Stocks by the Numbers. I want to thank you guys for stopping by. If you have any questions, comments, or concerns, drop it down in the comments section. I'm usually very quick to reply. Thumbs up algorithm helps me get more eyes on the channel. And of course, subscribe to the channel. That is our handshake agreement. That is how you help me help you. But more importantly, moving forward, like I always say, I understand that markets are rocky, they're volatile, and they are very uncertain. So I want to wish all of you success. I hope everyone makes a couple of dollars. Thanks for stopping by. Have a good day.